I saw this video on my timeline before even opening up stream. I got jump scared a little bit by it because I saw the MSNBC logo and then Fuentes' face, and I really want to know what the fuck they're saying about this. Inside the great Maga divide.
And now to the brewing war within Maga over the future of the American conservative movement. It comes as far-right influencer Nick Fuentes recently recorded a cordial interview at the invitation of Tucker Carlson that more than 5 million people have viewed. This is the same Fuentes who was once barred from nearly every social media platform for violating hate speech policies. The conversation the two had has sparked backlash from a number of
Isn't he still? The only social media platform that's let him back on is Twitter, right? Because of Elon?
Conservatives. However, other leading conservatives rushed to Carlson's defense. Now, as the Washington Post puts it, the fallout is still resounding more than a week later as conservative media figures and influencers choose sides or try to heal a rift that they view as a threat to the cohesion of the Republican Party. The latest op-ed in the Los Angeles Times by our next guest is highlighting this growing division. Contributing writer Matt Lewis contends that some Trump loyalists are now objecting to MAGA's, quote, white power element. Matt joins us now. He's an author, columnist, and conservative writer. Matt, the fact that we're even talking about a quote-unquote white power element is, I think, concerning on its face. But this is also something that's persisted within MAGA over the course of the last 10 years. I mean, I remember covering when Trump himself had dinner with Nick Fuentes at the invitation of Kanye West just a few years ago, November 2022 at Mar-a-Lago. Why was this not a conversation then, and what's changed now?
Look, yeah, I think you're totally right. I mean, part of it is that Donald Trump is actually
not the accent I expected this guy to have, by the way, right off the bat. Why the fuck do you have Churchill? I don't know. I thought he would have some stuffy aristocratic accent. He sounds like a valley, like, you know, like a surfer kid. Anyway, the big shift, of course, is with the Heritage Foundation, where the Tucker Carlson, who is favored by the Heritage Foundation, had a talk with Nick Fuentes, prompting the head of the Heritage Foundation to say, you know, essentially, we like Tucker Carlson. We do not disavow him because we're not cuck snowflakes, but also I dislike Nick Fuentes, even though I think he should have a right to speak. And it's led to this whole, like, you can't really have it both ways. You can't endorse Tucker Carlson and his right to speak with neo-Nazis while disavowing neo-Nazism. Not that the Heritage Foundation has a problem with neo-Nazism. It's all very, very stupid. But I have a feeling this is going to blow up and not in their favor. Again, Nazism is a 90-10 issue.
She's been a really good friend to Israel. And so people who care deeply about this issue can comfort conservatives who care about this issue, could comfort themselves and say, look at all the great things Donald Trump has done for Israel. Donald Trump's daughter is a Jewish convert. That's all true. But yeah. The same thing, at the same time, in the last decade, we have seen the conservative movement really metastasize, and we've seen it become, you know, basically infested with people who have illiberal ideas, who don't really buy into democracy. Some of them are monarchists, and others are white supremacists and Holocaust deniers. And the problem, I think, is that this is really growing. Oftentimes it's under the radar. But one of the groups, you know, the Heritage Foundation, who got in trouble for initially speaking out and defending Tucker's interview with Fuentes as being, quote, you know, robust.
He does look a little fish-like.
Debate and discussion as opposed to laundering these horrible ideas. Apparently, according to some sources at the Heritage Foundation, a lot of their interns, something like 40 to 50% or something, agree with Fuentes, which is really stunning if you were around the conservative movement, like, say, in the George W. Bush era.
I think even around the conservative movement right now, I mean, like, this is not the kind of thing that we should see our mainstream parties embracing in any form or fashion. And I think that's the concern when you talk about statistics like the one that you just mentioned, when you talk about that leaked GOP group chat that featured members of the party from New York down to the South. I mean, that's the concern, is that this small faction might be ballooning to take up more space within the party, and that conversations like these might normalize something that the party itself should abhor. I think.
Does anyone else feel like I'm getting a reminder right now? This is MSNBC, ostensibly a liberal network. Liberals are so obsessed with discussing why they're right rather than hammering in why they're right. You know what I mean? Everything has to be a conversation. I feel like if there was a schism in my opponent's party and the schism was being caused by unexpectedly widespread support for a very loud and optically difficult neo-Nazi, I feel like it would be more prudent not to go, like, let's investigate the cause of this. You don't need to investigate, like, politically, you don't need to investigate it, you know? You can just attack them over it. Right? Wouldn't that be a little more sensible?
The larger thing to me and what makes this topic interesting, why we were drawn to your op-ed in the first place, is what this means for the party going forward. Because you're right that this is something they've been grappling with for the past 10 years. I mean, Donald Trump saying after what happened in Charlottesville, that there were good people on both sides. I mean, this has been a debate. But what happens when Trump is no longer at the head of the party and you're watching the party only now start to grapple with what do we make of this faction and what does it say about us as Republicans?
I mean, I think it probably gets worse, not better. I was giving a speech last week and a young man came up to me dressed like a young Republican. You know, he looked like he could have been a young Republican in 2005. And he said, every single one of my friends listens or watches Nick Fuentes. They don't all buy into everything he has to say, but the problem, of course, is the exposure. I mean, the conservative movement and the young conservatives, it's not Bill Buckley, it's not Ronald Reagan. It is Nick Fuentes who actually is the one of the premier voices, and then Tucker Carlson, you throw him in there too. And look, I think just recently we've seen people like Ben Shapiro, I think, step forward pretty bravely and say this is wrong and try to stop it.
Apparently this dude is a conservative political writer. Yeah, they said as much, but no, he's been around for long enough. I recognized his name, I think. But yeah, I mean, ultimately the schism, right, is that you have content creators who want to leech off of the populist dissatisfaction with the status quo, and you have people who are actually interested in governance, you know? Oligarchs want to leech because they're already so wealthy and detached from reality that they stop caring about the pillars that give them their power, whereas corporatists want to maintain the status quo because they benefit so much from it, you know? Oligarchs might like Fuentes, corporatists won't. And that sounds like an endorsement of him, you know, but the oligarchs are really just the advanced form of the corporatist. We're talking about a system in decay here, you know? At the end of the day, it really does come down to like corporate cuckery in Israel. There's no version of this country where anyone right of Bernie Sanders is in charge and we aren't cucked to corporations. There's no level of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Kanye West, Nick Fuentes, whatever else, where you're going to escape that dynamic because there's no power base for those people outside of organized capital, you know? The problem is, though, is that for a lot of these people, since they're more interested in leeching off the dissatisfaction than they are in actually governing, they can't govern. They're not capable of it. We're seeing this problem right now with Trump, right? The government's in disarray. It's so in disarray, he can't even get done the things he wants to get done. The country's getting worse, but it's not like things are happening the way Trump is happy with, right? Remember all those power plays with the National Guard and ICE? How are those going? ICE is tied up because no matter how much money they throw at the brown shirts, it doesn't change the fact that logistically doing what they're trying to do is incredibly difficult. And the National Guard thing just keeps falling through over and over again. They keep trying to do the unitary executive theory, no judges are allowed. The Supreme Court straight up got rid of federal injunctions, but it didn't stop the judges from stopping the the National Guard deployments. They just started doing it on an individual state basis. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like, everything is going poorly for everyone. It's universal incompetence here. Democrats just fucking threw Republicans a lifeline by bailing them out during the government shutdown, unfortunately, you know.
But, you know, Ben Shapiro was a supporter of Donald Trump. And so I do feel like it's one of this weird scenario where there are people out there who helped kind of build this monster and, you know, this Maga monster. And now they're seeing, look what we've created. It may be too late to stop at this point.
I think the open question, too, is like, does it matter that MAGA leaders, thought leaders online and on podcasts are actually kind of fighting with each other over this? And does it actually have any kind of political or electoral impact? I guess we're going to see what we end up seeing come the midterms and beyond. But I think that's sort of an open question as we head into this next phase of MAGA, where Trump himself is not going to be on the ticket and will not continue to be the leader of the movement. I think it's a stark contrast when we watch the way that Republicans are grappling with their future versus the way that Democrats are doing so, because I want to get your thoughts on that side of the coin. Because on the heels of redistricting wins in California, Governor Gavin Newsom was in Houston, Texas on Saturday to rally with state Democrats. That visit came after California voters, of course, overwhelmingly approved a plan to redraw congressional lines, a move directly targeting Texas's new congressional map. During the rally, Newsom criticized President Trump, who had pushed for Texas to redraw its districts.
We're dealing with an invasive species by the name of Donald Trump.
Not just Trump.
He is an historic president, however. Historically unpopular president. Why else? Why else did he make that call to your governor? Why else did he feel the need to rig the election before even one vote was cast? That's just weakness. Weakness masquerading as strength. That's Donald Trump. And he had a very bad night on Tuesday.
But I gotta tell you, he had a great night on Sunday.
Matt, I feel like, first of all, these are not the same, right? There are such stark differences in the ways that both parties are grappling with what their next chapters are going to be. What do you make of the fact that Republicans are grappling in the way that we led off this segment, whereas Democrats are grappling with, okay, how much of a fighter and what kind of fighter do we need going forward?
I think Democrats are about 10 years delayed, right? So Republicans were having this conversation a decade ago. We have to go with Trump because he's strong, because he fights, and overlook everything, right? Well, Democrats are now doing that. Look at Plattner in Maine. Look at Jay Jones in Virginia. Democrats have now said, we need fighters. And look, I think, 10 years ago, the adults in, not the Democratic Party per se, but the adults on the left kind of lost.
Don't get the wrong read on him, okay? I'm sure you could look at this guy's writings and find he's incredibly evil. What he's upset by is that he's losing control of the narrative. Corporatist conservatives don't like the fact that, because the corporatist conservatives are basically the same as moderate Democrats, right? Use whatever rhetoric you can to advance the status quo, corporate interest, tax cuts, blah, 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 right? Deregulation, corporate capture, whatever. And in their case, the Democrats do it with these meaningless platitudes, hope and change. We're going to make things marginally better for some people, id pull. And the Republicans do it with vice signaling, right? Like, we're tired of blacks having welfare or something. They eat lobster. I don't care. The bullshit. The bullshit they both do. You're aware. But he doesn't like the fact, much in the same way that people like Schumer are upset by the popularity of people like Mamdani, try to downplay it, take attention away from it. People like this guy are upset about the attention being given towards Fuentes. The difference, of course, is that Mamdani is an actually transformational political figure who wants to make the world a better place. And Nick Fuentes isn't interested in being a political leader. Again, he's a live streamer, right? He's an influencer. He likes that, and that's fine. That's a job a person could have. I don't think you should be a Nazi. I guess I'm fine with the concept of people being influencers. But there isn't really a way to capitalize on this disinterest from the right without being a soulless grifter content creator, which is why everyone in Trump's cabinet is like that. Whereas on the left, you can actually advance a left interest while being sincere about your policies. Does that make sense? You can run to the left of the Democrats while believing in things. But in order to run to the right of the Republicans, you basically have to believe in a world that is so anti-empirical, so built on vice signaling, that you can't actually govern.
The newsrooms, the young people, the millennials, the Gen Z folks kind of took over, and the adults didn't know what to do. I think that's now kind of happening to the Republican Party, where the adults who thought they were running the movement no longer are running the show. It's the Nick Fuenteses. But look, to your point, to the clip about Gavin Newsom, this is a guy that 6 months ago I kind of thought would have been a joke running for president as a Democrat. And in the last 6 months, he has shown the toughness that I think Democrats
okay. Of course he would say that because he and him are one of the same. A corporatist conservative and Gavin Newsom are the same person, and they understand that. They fear people like Mamdani. Nothing would fundamentally change under Gavin Newsom. They've been the same since Clinton, man. Yeah. At the very least, since Clinton. I mean, I think you could cut that argument back even further. It's like a joke. Republicans against Trump. Mamdani isn't the future of the Democrats. This guy is. They're terrified of Mamdani. They know that if people like Mamdani get increasingly popular, something might fundamentally change. And that's not the truth with like Fuentes, by the way. If Fuentes became like politically, and he never would, this is all like fantasy, but if he became politically powerful, he would engage in the same kind of empty vice signaling for attention that a lot of the people in Trump's cabinet currently do. You know, he could be like I don't fucking know. He would do like a proclamation as a senator that like he's decided Tinder is Jewish and gay, and that from now on women won't be allowed to sign up for dating apps. He's gonna introduce a bill. He would just be Mike Lee. He would just be Mike Lee again. We already have a Mike Lee. Every other day, Mike Lee tweets about how like he's pushing for the Build Hyperborea bill, and then nothing happens because he's just there for the attention. Mike Lee at home. Yeah, there's no actual interest in governing here. He really does tweet a lot, man. Based Mike Lee, I mean. I remember back when Mike Lee first became senator, or at the very least, like a couple of years ago, I shouldn't go too far back, people would, like his tweets would get a ton of attention. And now for the most part, they don't. And that's because it's just been years and years of like, haha, I'm a covert neo-Nazi. Look at my epic Groyper 4chan posting. Look at me, I'm a senator, but I'm like with it. I'm with it. Do you see? Do you see? And it hasn't really changed, and nothing's actually changed, so you get me. Why is Nick getting so popular? Fundamentally, it's young men's fear of young women, you know? That's the root of it. So incels? Yeah, right? I mean, to a large extent, I'd say, I think. Trump has pardoned everyone involved in the 2020 coup attempt. So there you go. He pardoned all the J6 people. Now he's pardoned all of the higher-up organizers, lawyers, everyone who lied or conspired to assist in the overturning. Completely expected, honestly. It's kind of surprising. If anything, it's kind of surprising he held off this long. Does anyone else agree? I feel like he held off so long on doing this. Maybe because he doesn't like Giuliani anymore? I have no idea. But yeah, a bunch of pardons, pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Lawless country.
President Trump has pardoned some of his most loyal allies from the 2020 era, all accused of trying to aid in his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results when he lost the White House to Joe Biden. On the pardon list, former Trump attorneys Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, as well as the president's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. In all, the Justice Department says that 77 people received what they're describing as, quote, full, complete, and unconditional pardons related to all of this. CNN's Kevin Liptak is at the White House for us on this one. Kevin, what more are you hearing about this? Is the White House saying more specifically on these pardons?
They're not saying more at this point, and you're right, this is quite a lengthy list, 77 names in all, many of whom will be familiar to anyone who's been kind of following this saga for the last 5 years. The president's pardon attorney posted the paperwork on social media last night. I think it's important to note that none of the names have actually been charged with a federal crime. So in a lot of ways, this is a symbolic move, but it still just underscores President Trump's effort.
Yeah, that's true. There's still a bunch of state charges directed against them. You know, it's not really that meaningful. It's just fucking stupid.
Efforts to kind of rewrite the history of the 2020 election. And I'll just read for you a little bit of the sort of preamble, which is pretty striking when it describes its intent here. It says, this proclamation ends a grave national injustice perpetrated upon the American people following the 2020 presidential election and continues the process of national reconciliation. And to tick through some of the names here, Rudy Giuliani, of course, the former New York City mayor who helped lead the effort to pressure states to reject Biden's victories. You also have Sidney Powell, who's the conservative attorney who worked with Giuliani, Mark Meadows, who is the president's chief of staff at the time, Jenna Ellis, who also worked closely with...
Whatever. It's a fucking vice signal. It doesn't even fucking matter. Yeah, but we needed the Dem president in 2028 to lock these people up in federal charges. Buddy, listen, we all need to dispel with this delusion right now, okay? I'm sorry you have to hear it from me, but it's true. There is a 0% chance that whatever Democrat is in power in the future is going to engage in punitive action against the Republicans. It's all going to be water under the bridge. The Republicans will say, that because Trump will be dead because he's like really fucking old and also his brain's melting. The Republicans will say, yeah, Trump went overboard on some stuff, but we're going to carry forward his essential legacy of protecting affordability for Americans. But we don't agree with the whole J6 stuff. And Democrats will be, okay, that's enough for us, I guess, then. We're just going to move on. And then the Republicans will win the next election. You know, it's going to keep happening over and over and over again unless something changes. Guarantee you. And if you disagree, I think you're delusional. I think you're actually engaging in like wishful thinking. Not workable. I am delusional? Okay, well, that can be that. I mean, that can, you know, that's also a possibility.